If you like this podcast or the previous ones, please consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Frankie'sPod. It just goes to help fund the software and the hosting. Back to the podcast. Tonight's a bit of a different one for me. They're not in, or they weren't in the British Army. It's going to be quite apparent that it's a very different podcast tonight. I'm interviewing a guy called RaiderDingo. Hi, Raider.
Howdy.
You're going to have to explain that to everyone as well.
Hi, boys.
Welcome to the show, the podcast.
Cheers.
Again, like I said to everyone, thanks very much for coming on and agreeing to do this. It's just the normal questions that I ask everyone. So, where did you grow up? Why did you join the military? What was it like? Why did you leave? And what have you ever done since? So, if you just want to start off by giving us a breakdown of where you grew up and what made you join the military.
I grew up in North Georgia, back in the States. I come from a long line of military veterans. In fact, my ancestors have not mixed a conflict since 1776. So, like every male member of my entire line and every uncle and grandfather and have all served. You know, my mother served, my grandparents, my brother served, my sister served, my cousins have all served. 2 of my sons have served. It's just how it is. So I joined in the 80s, late 80s, so out of high school. But if you can remember, if you're as old as I am, around the late 80s, everyone was poking sticks, but nobody was firing back.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, we had like Northern Ireland going on, so they were firing back.
But it wasn't overseas conflicts. You know what I mean? It wasn't.
No.
It was like USS Cole, Beirut. It was the bombings. It was taking out. We were flying jets into Beirut, and we were flying jets into Lebanon, and our ships were blowing up, but nobody was, dropping the hammer.
Yeah, there was not any feet on the ground there.
Yeah, so as a kid, I grew up, with, most of my neighbors were all Vietnam veterans. And then most of their uncles and grandfathers, like mine, were all World War II and Korea vets. One of my grandfathers, he was a 3-time loser. He was World War II in the islands, fighting the Japanese. Then he fought Korea, and then he fought in Nam before he retired. And then my other grandfather, World War II, 5 brothers, all left. They all fought. That's just how it was growing up as a kid in the South. You couldn't, if it was so unusual to have a neighbor or an uncle or a friend where their father or someone in their family was not a veteran.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, especially Vietnam. Because there was that many people
that's how it was. So my father didn't go to Nam because he was sole surviving heir, but my mother did. So that's just how it worked. And there was, of course, when the draft came along, but anyways, it's quite complex. But it needs to say everyone that I've ever known as a kid growing up, they were all veterans. So I went off. So I joined the Foreign Legion right out of high school because I was kind of watching and I was waiting for my turn because I wanted to go in the forces and nothing was going on. I said, well, and then I had a uncle who used to tell me stories about meeting Legionnaires in Vietnam when they first landed. And of course they were the old guard, when I say old guard, you know what I mean? They were all like former Waffen SS.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention that, but yeah.
The Legion used to be full of loads of them, like loads and loads. Yeah. So, old war horses. So I grew up stories listening to that. And then anyway, so one day I thought, well, I'm going to go join the Legion. So
Did you have a romanticized view of them, though?
Huh?
beforehand? Did you have like a romanticized view of the Legion beforehand?
No, I just knew they were always in conflict.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So I called up the French embassy in Washington, D.C., asked to speak to the military attaché, because back then this was pre-internet.
Hmm.
So there was a couple books kicking around, but not very many. And obviously internet and information was non-existent. So they sent me some little packet of where to join, the requirements, and then I bought a plane ticket, and then flew over and showed up. And so that would have been June of '88. And then, of course, as a young boy coming up in the States, you really don't understand draconian, hardcore military discipline from before the days of health and safety.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was
So
neat.
to say it was a shock to your system is like a bit of an understatement.
So it was quite brutal,
Yeah.
beatings and just very brutal. So I was lucky because I was quite young. I was like 19. So I was able to absorb the language quite quick. And with anything, unless you can give orders, understand orders, disseminate orders, read, write, be literate, that's the keys for promotion. So back when I joined, there were loads of Brits, like loads. When I mean loads, I think probably 75% of my regiment was British.
Wow.
So a lot. And there was a couple boys from the States, like 2 in the regiment. Everybody else was just, we had New Zealanders and we had Aussies. We had a whole bunch of kickbacks from SUDAF, from South African Defense Forces. But we had a whole bunch of guys out of the Falklands. We had but in general, it was just a bunch of guys that were probably disheartened with their current situation getting out, or there was quite a lot of Brits for some reason, whatever they were not able to join the British forces. So something would have exempted them from service. Whereas in the States, if you got a criminal record, you're not going in. We just don't take you.
Right. Okay.
We never ever. So you, like in the States, you had to have like a high school diploma, which would be your GCSEs or your A levels.
Yeah.
Right. So you had to have a diploma, and then you were obviously had to be physically apt and all this other stuff. So if you had a criminal past, you were exempt going into the forces. They wouldn't take you. And that's just how it was. So that was a big difference dealing with and serving with British guys in the Legion, whereas in the States probably would have never been exposed to that. So they were quite a rough bunch. But, of course, they're all alpha males. Everyone's all trying to prove themselves. So, but still good guys. Sometimes their off-duty antics outweighed their usefulness as soldiers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that happens in any army.
So, but the difference in the States, off-duty antics will get you kicked out.
But the British army get you promoted.
So it was quite a big difference. So I stayed in. My first regiment, I went to the cavalry, so I was a cavalry scout. But anytime we got deployed, it was like quick reactionary force. So it was like everybody, obviously at the beginning, you're still an infantryman. So we got deployed quite a few times. It was, rucks on your back, rifle, and boots on the ground. And then you would that's how you served. And the first Gulf War kicked off. And so we got deployed with our regiment. And I was a young NCO at that point in time. I was promoted quite quickly, like I said, because I was able to understand the language and could read and write. And so where you had Brits that were in for a while, but they were still speaking like pidgin French. So most of them.
Did that cause issues as opposed to just the promotion? But did that cause issues with the? Because as I understand it, all the officers are French. They're not foreigners.
No, all the officers are all from Saint-Cyr, Saint-Etienne. They're all from they would be your equivalency of very posh military schools.
Yeah.
So,
So
a
did that
non-person
cause
just
issues with them and the guys who, like, I wouldn't say refused to learn it, or just couldn't learn, fluent French?
no, it's if you got a toolbox, you're going to use every tool. You're going to use everything in your
Yeah,
toolbox. So if your orders are basic and you can understand your orders, go, run, jump, flank, shoot, kill. Uh, it's pretty basic. Uh, and of
yeah,
course, it's all
fair
drilled into
enough.
their head by repetition. You can still teach a dog to sit and stand and fetch. So,
Yeah.
right, if you break it down to simple terms. Uh,
Yeah,
so that wasn't an issue, but it would hinder a lot of the Brits from being promoted because of their language abilities.
yeah.
Instead of, oh, me go here, sit, talk, yes, want to eat. Instead of, hey, I'm hungry, I'd like to get something to eat, please. If you can understand the
Yeah,
concept of how
yeah,
that
I know
works.
what you mean. Yeah, yeah, I understand that.
So, anyway, so it came time and then I changed right after the first Gulf War. I changed regiments and I went to the infantry regiment, and I served. So I was in Orange first, in Orange, Francis, with a cab, and then we went and I was stationed in Nîmes with the infantry. And then it came time for me to get out, and because I was ready to go to school, start a family. I did my 5 years. I did an additional 6 months, so I did a total of 5 years, 6 months, and I was
Yeah,
ready to
and
get out.
that's the minimum, isn't it? 5 years
Yeah,
is the minimum.
5 years, 5 year contract, and I was ready
Yeah.
to get out and start my life. And then I got married. I married about 3 weeks after I was released from service because I was dating a local girl, French girl.
Yeah.
Uh, Old military family as well. Her dad was in the Paras. And anyway, so we got married, and then we moved back to the States. And it took me about 5 months to realize that I was not able to adjust to civilian life.
Yeah.
So
The
I went
thought of
back
that,
in.
yeah.
So I went back in the U.S. Forces, and had to go to basic training, the whole thing all over again. Even though I was a non-com with combat experience.
Yeah.
So anyways, I had to start back over from zero. Uh,
So how were you treated with that? With having that experience, how did you
well,
going
you let them know
into
your prior
training and
service. Well, you let them know
yeah,
you let your recruiter prior service, and of course I'm off to basic training, and then I was what 26 years old maybe, yeah, about 26 going back to basic training, and then of course you're at your peak at that point in time because you're running and you're doing all the other stuff and rucking, and we used to do 100-mile road marches for Christ's sake, so. And obstacle horses. So I was in pretty good physical shape. So basic training for me in the U.S. Forces was quite amusing. Uh, so
fair enough. I was going to say,
yeah, I
yeah,
was like, okay,
jeez.
whatever. So a couple of my drill sergeants were like, hey, Ferguson, because my name's Ferguson. He goes, Ferguson, French Foreign Legion, prior service. What is that, Peace Corps? And I'm like, yeah, Peace Corps. Jokingly. So, but
I'm not being disparaging to the Americans, but he's a very you don't see the outside world a lot, type of
yeah,
thing.
he
And
was a young NCO, and obviously he hadn't been around the block yet.
yeah,
And then we had a transfer drill sergeant and drill sergeant Million, and he was from 82nd. And when we were in the first Gulf War, when I was a non-com, I did a lot of cross training with the Americans because obviously I was American. And then it would only
yeah,
stand to reason that if we were doing cross training, I would train show the Americans how our weapon systems work, et cetera, et cetera. To put it in perspective, we had one of the ODA teams, so one of the Special Forces teams from the U.S. Forces attached to us, and they supplied air cover for us, close air support. And then we
mhm,
had one of their NBC vehicles follow us along, and then we had extra radios in our vehicles, so we would communicate from our hires to not only we were doing our jobs, but we were also communicating, liaising between the U.S. forces that were across attached to us. So one day I get called in the office by one of the drill sergeants. He had this photo of me. He says, "Hey man, is that you?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." And he's like, "Oh man." After that, I was golden. And he's like, "No,
Yeah.
dumbass. He wasn't in the Peace Corps." So, so,
Oh God.
so when I went in the U.S. Forces, I started out as a forward observer. So close air support, artillery, mortars, naval gunfire.
Yeah.
And then when I got assigned to Big Army, I got recruited and pulled into Brigade Recon, and then that's where I spent most 99% of my time in the U.S. Forces. That was up at Recon. So Brigade Recon is so for brigade. That's like so. You guys got brigades, but a brigade in this forces was like about 5,000 men, obviously, because you have divisions, and then divisions have loads. You have roughly about 20,000 men, sometimes 15,000, depending on the division. It's like, for example,
Yeah. It's
Fort
like half
Bragg.
our army at the moment, almost.
Well, for example, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which is now Fort Liberty. There's 82nd Airborne, there's 18th Airborne Corps, there's Aviation Wing, there's loads of service and support, but there's roughly about 90,000 people on that base.
Well, that is more than our army.
You know what I
So I
mean?
think we're about 85,000 at the moment. And that's just ridiculous.
Whereas when I was in Legion, we were about 1,200 on a base. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which was a regiment.
So, but similar to the British. Or,
Yeah,
I mean, we could do
British.
Yeah.
So I spent most of my time up at BRT. And then when I got changed over to I got assigned after being in the States, then I had to do an overseas tour, and I got assigned to First Armor, and then I was up at BRT in First Armor because every unit has to have a reconnaissance unit. So you have 18 forward observers and 18 scouts. Because if it depends, because big army in the United States, you combine infantry with armor, and it's all incorporated. Because obviously, war in the desert or war in open spaces moves fast. It's not trench warfare or it's all little bitty small unit tactic. It's large scale. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's almost blitzkrieg.
Huh?
It's like almost blitzkrieg. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I got assigned over to BRT over in First Armor in Germany, then it was the same concept. It was everyone that I knew from before. Everybody was either in the Range Battalion or at a 82nd or at a 18th Airborne Corps. So all the guys were from the same cut of cloth, and we were all from the same background. And then after that, then I got shipped back stateside, and then I was with 82nd, and then I was medical discharged. Normal stuff, if you're a paratrooper, you get hurt.
Yeah. Knees, back, spine.
Well, yeah, leg. I destroyed my right foot so bad that it took 4 surgeries and 2 years to put it back together. They gave me the option of amputation because the surgeries would have been quite extensive, which they were, because basically my foot was just jello. So hardware introducing, hardware coming out, tendons removal, nerve removal. But I said, listen, if you're going to amputate, you got to take both feet. So he's like, I said, well, if you're going to give me magic legs, I can be taller.
Oh, God. Fair enough.
First, if I'm going to get a new leg, I want new legs, and I want to be a little taller. So, anyways, so my 2 of my sons have served. First one was in the Air Force. He's an intelligence analyst. Got out. Him and his wife live in Pennsylvania. He's a chemical engineer. And then Angus, who is my other son, he grew up here in Scotland, but he wanted to go to uni, and obviously we don't get the free uni as an American migrant, which is also quite expensive for first world country people to migrate to the United Kingdom. And put it in perspective,
it's a bit cheaper for others.
Well, yeah, but to put in perspective, all in all, with the fees and the lawyer fees and all these other things, I think we're nearly 44 grand.
Wow.
and then of course the stipulations are no public funds, no freebies, no, obviously we pay for everything. So my boy wanted to go to uni, and I'm like, well, I can't afford uni. So, with that being said, because I have 8 kids, but
Yeah,
they're
you've
all
been busy.
but they're all grown.
Yeah.
My oldest is 29, and my youngest is 5. But the age difference
That's a
between
spread and a half. That
the difference between the youngest and the one above him is 15 years.
That's a big gap. Yeah, that's a big gap.
Well, new wife, new kids.
Yeah.
When you divorce, you never go old and worn out, do you?
I have.
You get younger faster.
I'll have to bear that one in mind. Can we go back to your time in the Legion, if you don't mind?
Yeah, no worries. Go ahead.
So you mentioned that you're there active tours with there, with the Legion. Sorry. Most people, including myself, won't know the places that you deployed with the Legion. So can you give us like an
Well,
idea of what that was like?
Well, we did. So when I was a young troop, we deployed out to the Indian Ocean, military shore force. There's a detachment out there in the islands, and it was show a military force. And then at that point in time, you had some dumbass named Bob Dinar from the Belgian Congo that was from the neighboring island. He was getting rid of his little puppet government, so we had to intervene in that one. And then we came back, and you do your normal stuff. So like for example, a slot for commando school comes up, and it's not just you that goes; it's your whole unit that goes, regardless if you've been there or not. So, so the slot was, we have a slot for commando school, or whatever school it was. Everybody goes, regardless if you, like I said, have been to the school or not, or if you're already pre-qualified. Everyone just goes again. And then if you are attending and you fail it, you still have to stay till the end.
Wow.
So
very different mindset then. Yeah.
Yeah, you would do all sorts of crazy things. It would be like summertime comes along and you've got to go out to one of their big camps called Camp Tangiers, and that's where they have all their live fire. And then all the non-coms would go, and you would be assigned, and you'd have to go do EOD for the summer. So wandering through the minefield or wandering through the shooting ranges, picking up unexploded OEX.
Yeah, keep that yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't
So,
I mean, to be fair, we've done similar. Yeah.
But you know what I mean? But that's just how it was. So if there was a tasking, everyone would go. So, and then so we did the first Gulf War. We were
so what
deployed.
was that like as an experience then?
Oh, I was a young man. That was my first, like, obviously it was the hype, wasn't it? It was the hype of what the war was and what the Iraqi were and what the Republican Guard were, and just. And then of course we spent months in the neutral zone, and while you're in the neutral zone, we had a whole bunch of inter exchanges with other allied forces, because not everyone was talking the same thing. So there was a whole bunch of blue on blue that happened in the neutral zone. So it was
I didn't know that. I mean, I heard stories about the Yanks and the Brits, and I've almost been caught up in that myself in the second Gulf War.
Yeah, so you would be you would go in the neutral zone, and you would be snooping and pooping, because we were light armor regiment, so we were reconnaissance, cavalry scouts, heavy ham. And I was in a AMX 10RC, which is a 105, heat hesh saber capabilities, 15 tons, light skin, 20 millimeter would pop you like a tin can. Later on, they upgraded us with some additional armor. A couple times we came around a corner and we got engaged by some Soviet armor. I think it was friendlies. And of course, their shit's bouncing all off the top of us, and then we got orders that they were friendlies, so we didn't engage. Because
Yeah.
everyone was out there in the desert. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, and everyone was raring to go, weren't they? Because they've been stood for
yeah.
so long.
And then not only that, then the Iraqis were always dropping, because we had the American NBC teams with us. They had an experimental vehicle called the Fox,
Yeah.
and we were out of Germany, but they could detect X amount of parts per million for chemicals. So the Iraqi bastards used to drop neurotoxins. They would lob their artillery and then let the night air just bring it to you. Of course, the stuff settles in the low-lying areas. So I lost count how many times our alarms would go off. We would have to freaking vamoose, pick your shit up and freaking haul ass, mop up and put your mop 4 on and haul ass, and then it was whether you got caught, you got hit, and then it was decon, and so. But that entire time, I only had one time where I had to use the anthropine.
I'm glad we never got experienced that. We used to get the alarm. We was at Camp Blackadder, and our alarm used to go off, and we'd all run out. We'd all done, get into our NBC suits and then dive into the trenches that we dug. And then we'd look down the line of tents, and you'd see people just stood there having a smoke, and you think, what the hell's going on?
And then it got so monotonous. I used to just sleep with my gear on and just ignore the freaking alarms, because you were.
Well, what had happened with us is our alarm would go off, and the American camp that was next door to it, they'd be getting the all clear by the time our warning had gone off. So we were the guys who were close to the American camp was listening to their alarms and not listening to ours.
Because
we were all running out as fresh. And
we were the farthest. We were the farthest west.
Yeah.
So our unit was the most farthest west, and then we had 82nd Airborne, and then 3rd Infantry Division and 24th Infantry Division. We had quite a lot of U.S. troops all around us. So the main mission of ours was, so when the hammer dropped and the ground war started, we pierced like 150 odd K into enemy territory, and we took the airport of Al Salman intact for a forward operation base.
Wow, that is
So
that's quite
still
whereas we kind of like done a left hook, didn't we, into Kuwait itself?
We were farther out of Rafah. So we crossed over by Rafah, and then we just popped it, and we just drove all night, and then at early morning dusk, we shelled the living daylights out of the combat positions at the airport, and then we just went in and blazing. And then after that, it was, we were taking out T-55s, ZSU 234s, bunkers. We hammered them pretty good. And then our job and goal was to take the airport, so obviously there'd be a forward operation base for resupply if the war had to continue, which we all know that it didn't.
It was over fairly quickly. Did you take many casualties?
Yeah, dumbasses playing with OEX.
All right, fair enough. It happens.
But we hit them so fast they didn't even know what was happening. We were taking. We would take it like we pop up over a ridge, and you see an assembly area of and it was like all artillery, and the guys were all picking their noses because they had no idea, because their hires had cut them all off, so they had no comms. We had destroyed their infrastructure with the air war, and so anybody we hit, they had no idea we were coming.
Yeah.
So, and then when we, like, for example, we were hammering this arty unit, and then later on when we swept through, they still had their guys chained to the artillery pieces.
Jesus, I didn't get that, bloody hell.
So
yeah,
it was a whole nother experience. Anyway, so when they called ceasefire, I was actually quite mad. So because it's like, dude, we've been over here for how long, and these guys aren't going to play with us no more. So.
Yeah. It was like a bit of a letdown for you.
Yeah. So that was what the goal for was like. Then we had to stay in country, and then we had to pull security for strategic landmines that had been placed, because obviously all the Bedouins are rolling in, and they're like, blowing themselves up and blowing up their livestock. But you're pulling guard over a strategic, where they had landmines at, cluster bombs, everything else, and then you wake up in the morning, or you're freaking the sun comes up and there's a Bedouin camp, installed right in the middle of it, and then it's whoosh, 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 up goes a camel, up goes a kid. So
Jesus Christ.
And then after that, then it was like pick up the wounded, ascertain what's been hit, give them medical care, and then of course we don't speak Arabic. So what are you going to do? Yeah. See ya.
There's not a lot you can do, really, is there? Try and help them get them out of there. I mean, we've had experience of the Bedouin in Jordan when we were firing over there, and they were just walking into the impact area, and we were saying, "What are you doing? You're not allowed in there. We're firing them." And they were going in to try and see if there was any shells left, so they could steal the metal.
Oh, I know.
It was
the same thing.
Crazy.
So years later, when I was in U.S. Forces, it was when Clinton got caught with the cigars in the Oval Office. Because obviously
he doesn't know what he's looking. What he's on about. Look it up.
There was no non-disclosure agreement signed on that one. The other ones he got away with paying everybody else off, but this one was she was so famous she saved the dress. So
the lovely moniker. Yeah.
So when that happened, he did a wag the dog, and he took our entire brigade and up and shipped us to the Iraqi border.
Right.
And we sat out there for 6 months waiting for Congress to come in back in session, because he used executive powers to deploy troops, because in the U.S. government you can deploy troops without Congress as a presidential order, and then you have to wait until it can be reviewed, and then Congress votes whether or not it was whether it was justified or not justified, which either brings troops in more to relieve you or bring you back home. So,
but very different the way the Americans work to the way we work, but also quite similar.
We sat out there and out there again, up on the Iraqi border, out of Kuwait, and of course you just get bored. So and you're in the impact. Of course you're like, well, what are you going to do? Well, we're going to go shoot some ammo. We're going to go shoot some arty. We're going to do some close air support, and it was the same concept. Stupid Bedouins roaming in your impact area. I don't know how many camels our brigade had to pay from getting blown up.
And they're all racing camels by the time they're, yeah.
Oh yeah, it was a whole
cost.
It's my praise camel. So, but the U.S. Forces, between the U.S. Forces and the Legion, I spent 90% of my career out in the open desert.
Yeah, it's not a nice environment, I must admit. I've spent some time there myself.
So after the U.S. Forces, I went to work I started military, kickback. So after the U.S. Forces, I was working in France, doing some training from some guys. And then that's when I got recruited to work for Discovery Military Channel. And then that's when we did Escape the Legion with Bear. But I think we're 2 years pre-production before the show aired.
Wow.
So, you're doing site surveys, you're doing all the logistics for weapons and locations, and because we filmed that in Morocco. So we had to do a bunch of liaising between ourselves and the Moroccan military, because we used their weaponry. And the area we were in was a militarized zone at the edge of it. So there was a lot of negotiating and things like that. And so but pre-production was quite lengthy. And I originally was not going to be on camera. And then they just asked me, hey, do you want to be on camera? And I'm like, well, you going to pay me to be an asshole? Yeah, sure. I don't care. Because when I left, before I got a Legion, I was a drill sergeant in the Legion. So
you've got to live out another little dream then as well.
Yeah, I didn't give a crap. And I'm like, you want me to yell at civilians and you're going to pay me how much? I don't care. Are they stupid enough to sign the paper? Yeah, sure.
So this is like very much like the Who Dares Wins that we do now.
Yeah, but
with the old SS.
it was a precursor to all that.
Yeah.
It was a precursor to all that.
I've never seen it. I'm going to have to dig it up. I'm going to have to see
Well,
it and download
to
it.
put an example, so Aunt Middleton, so Bear Grylls and I have been friends for 20-something years.
Yeah.
So every time Bear has like a show or he's not too far away, he'll like send me an invite. Hey, Glenn, do you want to come down with the family? Give you VIPs. We're like, yeah, sure. So a number of years ago, he brought us down to we came down to Manchester. We did one of his shows. I think it was Endeavor or something like that. You know, he was very good. You know, he's the type of guy that takes 5 to 10 minutes out of the circle of all his, everything else that's going on, like in the green room or all the PR. He'll take, 10 minutes and bring my kids backstage and talk to them. Hey man, how's it going? Your dad and I, we've known each other for years, et cetera, et cetera. How's school? So at that point in time, he had this was before Aunt Middleton was person non grata.
Yeah.
So he was doing the other show, and then he sat down with me. He's like, "Hey, Glenn," he says, "I've been watching all the reels of you guys out in the desert, and I've got quite a few ideas from you." So they were watching so when we filmed Escape the Legion, we did 30 days of filming. Roughly out of the days we had those guys doing stupid shit for about 20 hours a day. And of course, and then everything they do, then of course post production gets a hold of it, and then they develop a storyline that they want a narrative, and then they all whittle it down to 4 hours. So
how different was like the way the production company wanted you to portray it?
I don't know
what it was actually like.
It's all right. I don't. They have their agendas. I don't care. We got paid.
Yeah.
But the typical day for those guys is we would wake them up at like the crack of dawn, 10-mile running, and then we would smoke them and roll them around in the dirt, and we give some instruction and some history and everything else, and then we'd F with them some more, and then we would give them lunch, and then we would make them drink a lot of water and eat a lot of food, and then I would take them out in the dirt and roll them around and make them puke, and then we would do a bunch of other stuff like land nav or hand-to-hand combat or something, or some type of survival. And then around 10 o'clock at night, we would tell them good night, and then I would go in there and I would rake them up and make them put their rucksacks on, and I'd make them freaking ruck march through the desert for another freaking 10 or freaking 15 miles, and then we would let them go to sleep and then wake them up and start all over again.
Cruel. I mean, they signed up for it, so it's their own fault.
Well, but that's what the Legion was like. They just effed with you constantly.
Yeah.
So what we were, so between myself and the other two instructors, that's just how it was. You get effed with, we get effed with for like 4 months in basic training. So, yeah. So it was, but like they got 30 days, but of course the attrition rate was quite high. So we were losing people too much, too fast. And at one point in time, most of the contestants wanted to just quit. We're like, well, we don't care. You going to leave us with one guy or two guys? Right?
Oh, yeah, because you were still getting paid, weren't you? So, yeah.
Still getting paid, yeah, I don't care. So, but then production gets a hold of it and they change it. And they develop a storyline they want, and then they do it. Pretty simple. But that's just how it is. So, but anyways, yeah, so the show wasn't too bad. Good laughs. I enjoyed it. I got some.
So how long did you do that for?
For television.
No, how long did you do it for?
How long were we filming, or how long did Escape the Legion take?
So was it just the one program, or was it a season of them? Did you go back and do more of them, or?
I did a bunch of other shows I did different shows with them, but of course, when you work for television, everything is in pre-production, post-production, and then when you're all said and done doing a program, then it gets whittled down by the producers, and then it's shown to like a group, and then the group says yay or nay, and then either it's shelved or it's aired.
Yeah, fair enough.
So there's, I did quite a lot of programs with them, and Escape Legion was the only one that got aired.
I'm gonna have to look that up. I don't think I ever watched it. So,
Oh, it's pretty
mind
funny.
you, saying that I don't watch much. I don't watch much TV really. So I will look it up. So
Yeah.
what
So
happened after the Channel 4 stuff then?
then after Channel 4, I came back. I was like, well, I hate TV people. Can't stand them. Freaking too many B-type personalities.
Mm. Well,
Or
I've never experienced it, so I can't really comment on that.
too many
But I can
self-improvement.
imagine.
It's too many
Yeah, I can
self-improvement.
imagine.
And their political agenda is not exactly mine. So there's sometimes you just want to go, oh man, I hope you get bit by that viper that I'm not going to tell you I just saw.
I mean, people fall foul of them as well, don't they? I mean, we don't want to go on to the, when the Ant Middleton bit where, whatever he says upsets everybody else and it gets cancelled.
Oh
But,
yes,
people react.
You kidding? I was probably not the epitome. I was probably not the best person to be, because I was in the forces, and then and I was in a position where I had no filter. So usually whatever came out of my mouth was exactly what I was thinking. So
I think we all suffer from that a bit. I mean, I did when I came out of the army. You have to kind of adjust yourself to civilian life, which is quite hard.
yeah,
And that filter can get you into trouble, or that lack of filter, sorry,
yeah.
can get
So
you into trouble a little
so
bit.
after Discovery, military channel, I bounced back across the pond. Would have been 06. And that's when the big contracting for government contractors was all kicking off, for for Iraq and stuff. So my first position was with Blackwater.
No, they didn't have a very good reputation, did they?
No, well, they actually did. This is before they got in trouble with the Al-Ghraib, with the prison.
No, that's what I mean. I mean, in the end, they didn't. But I did hear that they sorted all that out and became a
Well,
good
it doesn't.
company again.
It's all politics, but like for example, but now when you go to work for those big companies, it's not like the Brits where they just go, all right, yeah, my resume been there, done that. We'll bring you in country, we'll do some verifying, and then we'll work it out. So when you go to work for U.S. U.S. contractors for the State Department, they bring you in for like a 30-day vetting program. So they bring you into one of their installations, and say they go, all right, you show up to you, there are like 70 guys. 70 guys are all standing tall, and you all have to have combat experience. You all have to be minimum non-commissioned officers, this, that, other things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So like say day one, physical fitness test, 2-mile run, 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, carry the 180-pound dummy, a bunch of other things. All right, so you lose 10 guys, because obviously age or whatever else. Just because you did it one time, you should still be able to do it if you're going to be working in that type of environment. Day two, like like most ex-forces guys, we all assume that we are proficient in all manner of weaponry. So day two is pistols, but we're not like talking like a static known distance range at 25 meters, and you stand there and you do your little one arm and you do your side, and something like a civilian would shoot. But it would be like a law enforcement tactical qualification. So magazine changes, X amount of rounds, these amount of meters, move up, 25, 17, 15, 11, 10, and 3, and with magazine changes. So you do like what a police officer would qualify working for maybe one of the good departments. But it was but that was a Department of Homeland Security qualification. So it was the same qualification that FBI agents and ICE agents use. So you do one pistol qual from the concealed and one pistol qual from the concealed holster and one from the drop leg. And then, so unless you've had formal pistol training, you're gone. So most guys, so to put it in perspective, most guys that are going to be cross-trained in those types of weaponry are going to be tier 1, tier 2.
Yeah.
they're going to be
And
quite.
if they meet that criteria, they're gone.
Yeah, they're going to be quite operational. So you have to have somewhere along the line. It's not you're a medic with his pistol at the 25 meters and sitting there with other guys on the military range, and it's all safety oriented, and you know. So let's say out of the 75, you've already lost maybe 10, so 65 guys. Then you lose like 20 guys for the pistol. Day 3 will be M4, M4 qual. And then the next couple days will be your GPMG, so your 240 and your 249er, so your mini-me and your GPMG. And then it'll be tactical shotgun, tactical AK. So all said and done, after the first week of pistol qual or rifle or weapons qual, you're maybe 20 guys, and that's going to be your old tier 1 and tier 2 guys. So that's
Wow.
how. And then after that, then it's like driving and tactical driving, and then I think at that point in time we had like a race course. Blackwater up at Roanoke, they had like a race course, and you have vehicles, and you do pit maneuvers and all this other crap, and all your instructors are race car drivers.
Bloody hell.
Shoot house, you're in there with simunitions. You walk into the shoot house. Tactical trauma med. So, like, say if you say they bring you into a shoot house, they throw a bunch of concussion grenades in there, and then smoke grenades, and then pull off your mask, and then you've got a casualty. You have to evaluate your casualty, save your casualty. If he dies, you're gone. And
Christ, I
then
didn't realize it was like this.
yeah, and then when you start, and then it's still your background check. So you have to fill out an SF-86, which is basically 10 years of your life. So they interview your neighbors, interview all past employers, check your financial history, so you can have no bankruptcies, no financial problems. You can't owe money to anybody. You can't have anything that can be used against you to leverage. No criminal convictions. So, and then they offer you a contract. So basically, when you work for a U.S. company, like I said, so they bring you in for like a 30-day vetting. You might be like 75 guys that show up, and then at the end, maybe 17 of you make it all the way through. And then you sign your contract, and when you work for a company, everyone is all been verified the same way. Everyone has had the same type of training, cross-training, same type of group. So generally, all your guys are like tier 1, tier 2. There's no one just because he was in the forces or he was in the Marines or he was in the Army, unless he was in some type of specialized unit, he won't be there working with you. So everyone works and acts the exact same. And then you're locked with a company for a year. So you can't be jumping contracts because the company had to pay for your background checks and your training or your certification of your certification that you've been trained.
Okay.
So
I mean, it's good money, wasn't it? It's good money there. I mean, the Blackwater and that made, well, billions probably. So for working for like a contractor like that, what about when the question would have for you here would be, what about cover for yourself, medical cover?
Oh yeah, yeah. No,
Like
we're not like the Brits or like the European companies. You're working for Department of Defense and Department of State. You're completely
right,
covered.
okay.
There's no
Yeah.
there's no like if, ands, or buts. Like you get hit, you're medevaced out to Longstool on a military transport, and you're in a military hospital, been put back together by military doctors.
Yeah, because I hear a lot of stories of guys who went out there contracting from the Brits and that, and things happened, and they just like kind of washed their hands of them.
Well,
they didn't get any cover from the Brits, they
well,
didn't get any cover from the Americans, or
not to be horrible, but your Brits don't even take care of you guys after you leave.
no, yeah.
So if you're subcontracting from a British company to be subcontracted, you're not working for the Minister of Defense. You're being subcontracted by somebody else that's way down the food chain. So in the end, you're just cannon fodder. So when you work for a U.S. company, you're subcontracted by the U.S. State Department. You have U.S. State Department identification. You're covered under U.S. government. So anything that goes wrong with you, and of course you pay your taxes. You're exempt X amount of taxes if you're gone for so many days off the U.S. territory. It gets kind of complex. Anyways, I did that for oh gosh, because I bounced back and forth from different companies. I did Iraq over and over and over again, and then I did Afghanistan, and then I shifted gears, and then I trained up guys for Somalia and Darfur. So we were training up guys for the AFRICOM, African Command, for peacekeeping missions for, like Somalia and Darfur. So UN peacekeep. We were training up UN peacekeepers, but we were under the umbrella of the U.S. State Department.
Right.
And that's the same concept.
I mean, another question I've got for you on that is how different being a contractor out there would it have been for actually going out there with the airborne, like with the actual regular forces? Was it different roles, or was it?
You're an advisor.
Yeah.
You get say like my last trip out there. Well, give an example. So I ended up in the end ended up getting permanently assigned to the Kurds, but I was not just like working for the Peshmerga or something like that. I was permanently assigned to the Kurdish Prime Minister and his detail.
Right.
And I trained up all of his close protection detail for his counter assaults, his uniform service, and his advance parties. So I ran a program like that for them for years with a bunch of other guys that were in the same type of group that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
And to put it in perspective, so we're on a base, 4 gringos on a base, and if they get hit, we interact with our counterparts.
Yeah.
So, it's just how it is. So, but when you're in big army and you're doing everything else, you're in the army. You're not off.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of other things. But on the other hand, if we got hit and we needed support, we would get on the horn, and it would be Apaches and Blackhawks in the air.
Whereas with the British companies, they've got bugger all. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys probably can't even get ammo.
I know guys who've been out there and done that, and you're not exaggerating. And it's a sad fact.
You see them, and it's like, for example, years ago we were down in Burundi, and we were training up guys because we would go down and we would train up battalions to go off and to fight Al-Shabaab or do peacekeeping operations in Somalia. And of course, Al-Shabaab was active against us, and they would come and they would do bombings in our restaurants, and they would try to get us in our hotels, a bunch of other things. So there was a couple Brits that were doing security detail for some UN team, and they were protecting some British diplomat. And you try to give, because we are, like, for example, we get the heads up on our intel brief from the regional security officer and all the other agencies about possible attacks. Things are going to happen on us, on our team locally.
Yeah.
To put it in perspective, when we would go to a hotel, the local host nation we were staying at, they would do a company of soldiers to babysit our hotel while we were sleeping in it. And we were moving from point A to point B from our hotel to the training ground. We had a military escort. So, and then you try
different than what the Brits are doing.
So then of course you have a British security team working a detail, and you try to be courteous, and you're like, dude, this is our intel, and of course their egos outweigh their ability to do what they need to do or what they can do, and they like, oh, you don't need to tell us, or you don't need to help us. I'm like, all right, dude, fucking crash and burn then. Yeah.
I mean, it happens, doesn't it? Like you say, the egos. There's certain types of people who probably shouldn't be doing certain jobs, and some of the people out there are like that. They go out just like gung ho, and they don't appreciate the actual gravitas of the situation that they've got themselves into.
Yeah. So it was, but I did it for.
You get guys out there who haven't got experience, got contracting, and they've been in the army for 3 years or whatever.
I did it for so many years that I would turn down positions unless I was on a team of guys I knew professionally.
Yeah.
So I ended up working with the same group of guys, for years. Like one of my buddies, I call him Mike the Jew, but Mike the Jew, he was because he's Jewish. But anyways, my buddy Big Mike, but that was his nickname, Mike the Jew. And he called me my nickname. So, but him and I, we were in Iraq together. We were in Afghanistan together. We went down to Haiti together. We were in South Sudan together. We were in Uganda together. We just all over. So we were always. So you get to a point in time when you've been working long enough on the details, is you can, unless you know someone that's on those teams, because when things go wrong, you don't want to be dealing with a
idiot.
A question.
Yeah.
Right. So either because I got to the point in time where I was working with some guys, and that were on the range, I could tell where they were trained, whether they were trained with the military, where they were trained with one of the federal services, where they were trained with the State Department, where they were trained with one of the high-end units. You could tell on how their gross motor skills and how their weapon manipulation was where they were trained.
Mm.
If a guy was a Brit and he starts messing around with stuff, you could tell that maybe the only weapons experience he's ever had is what he learned in the British forces, because it's all safety oriented.
Yeah, I get that. I see what you're saying there. Yeah.
So you could tell basically how people were based on how their gross motor skills. So, anyways, I did that for a number of years, and then so I remarried, retired, and then I moved to Scotland. And then about 2 years after I got to Scotland, I was called back, so I went back out to Iraq, working for the exact same people I was working with before. Because when you work in that industry with certain type of clients that the government assigns you to, they don't bring in new bodies. They only bring in people they know and trust. So, and then I was back out.
You
in
say
Iraq.
when you say that you were called back, was it a case of did you have any choice in that, or was it a volunteer?
Well, I don't know. When the government calls you, you go. Yeah.
So yeah, you did volunteer then.
I think I must have volunteered loads during my life, but when they call you, it's like yeah, sure. Like today, if they
Yeah.
call me, well, I'm old, I'm like 50, 56. Now, ideally, if they call me, I would go. Whether my health would hold out, that's a whole other thing, but I wouldn't obviously endanger others through my inability to perform, which I know that I have limitations now.
Yeah.
So, but, like, for example, one of my boys.
If Uncle Sam calls, you're going. Yeah, I get it.
Well, like, for example, one of my boys, I'm the philosophy, if your government calls, you go. So, like, I've had 2 boys that have served. My boy, one of my sons, he's just left out of the U.S. Army, 173rd Airborne. He was stationed in Italy. He's been a civilian for all of 3 weeks. And I've got another son that's just finished school, University of Birmingham. And I'm putting his ass in at the end of the year. Yes.
And is he looking forward to that?
I don't know. I don't ask him. No, it's idiot.
Fair enough.
I don't know. As long as there's
good, it'll do him good.
Well,
you sound as though you miss it anyway. So I suppose when you've been doing it that long, that's all you know as well.
Well, when you know that it's over and you get used to doing things, it's not. You got to go with it. Probably if I hadn't been hurt my first time, I probably would still be in. I'd be a lifer. The forces was just too easy for me. It's like, for example, everyone talks about the 22 or PTSD or all this other shit. Me personally, I do not know, nor have I ever fucking met or served with anyone that has those problems.
Yet.
So I'm from a mentality and group of guys that when they say it's time for war, we all got excited. Sorry,
Yeah,
I live out in the country. I live out in the country. That's one of the farmers. So, but you know what I mean. I was with a bunch of A-type personalities. So when they call us to war, everyone's like yippee-ki-yay, let's go. So, and all my
very
friends
different mentality than most people.
Yeah, but when all my friends and everyone I know, no one has those issues. So, you know,
Yeah.
I just send my boys. You got to go. You go.
So what's the future hold for you then?
Grandkids.
Yeah, I've got some myself. It's
Well,
great how then you can hand them back when they get too noisy.
the thing was when I was in the forces, I never got to see my kids grow. So, you know, you're home and then you make a baby and then you get deployed and then you come home and that baby's walking and talking. And then you get home and then another one's being born. And then you get home, another one's being born. Another one's walking and talking. And this one's going to school. So my first go at a family, I was never home. I missed a whole bunch. So now I'm stay-home dad. My wife works. I get my pension because they don't make us wait until we're 60 or something for our pension. If you do your time, you get your pension. So I've had my pension now for a number of years. And then my wife still works. And then so I'm a stay-at-home dad. So, you know, do the school run, do the horses, do the swimming. So yeah, I don't mind.
It sounds like, I mean, you've lived a life, and it is time for you to slow down a bit anyway. But you're saying that about missing your kids growing up and missing your or not be. I would not say not being there for your family because you were doing a job. You didn't have the choice. I mean, you had the choice to do the job, but
in general,
you go where you're told.
That is probably one of the biggest things of guys that I've served with over the years is the fact we have always been gone. And obviously your relationships suffer and your children grow up, you know, with memories of you being there and not being there.
I mean, the other thing with the American forces, your deployments are a lot longer than ours. So generally, I was 6 to 7 months. Yours were like minimum of 12 months or something.
Yeah, you're a year.
Yeah, that's a long time.
And then when I was doing contract work, or when I was doing work for the Department of State, you're like 3 months on, 3 months on, and like a month off. 3 months on, month off. It's the same thing.
You can't
but
get, that's like unsettling. Like you can't settle a family like that, can you?
No, so you just a lot of guys suffer in the relationship period for that. And of course, maybe their spouses they enjoy the cash, but if the guy's not home, the guy's not home. So
that's going to cause issues elsewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, of course there's always a problem. But I spent most of my time. So over the years, so I was, and then me, since I was always assigned somewhere else, I would do a residence outside the States. So I like living in, I lived in Hungary for a while. I actually had residence in Iraq, which I loved. Loved Iraq. Iraq's like one of the coolest places to live.
Really?
Yeah, loved.
Even with the job you were doing?
Yeah, hell yeah. You kidding? You're so far up the echelon, man. You're living high on the hog. Well, when I was working for example, when I was working for the Kurds, for the prime minister, I'm lodged on the prime minister's compound. I have my own vehicles I can access. Everybody that's working for me is I've trained their uncle or their father.
You felt quite safe as well?
Oh, hell yeah. You kidding? Well, plus I had enough freaking armament and munitions in my room to freaking probably take down a small government. Yeah.
I always remember seeing there was a YouTube video of a guy. I think it was one of the Vice channels. They interviewed a guy who was he says he was ex US Special Forces, and he was doing something with the Kurds, and he was in jail. I can't remember that was sorry, not Kurds. I can't remember if it was Iraq or Afghanistan. It might have been Afghanistan. He said he'd gone out there to work with the Mujahideen, and he was in jail with the Mujahideen. And he was like implying that he was a contractor sent there by the Department of State, and I'm like, yeah, no, I totally get that. Yeah,
bullshit.
But
No.
I remember seeing it. I'll have to dig it up and send you the link for it.
No, the thing is, when you work for certain types of agencies, you are completely covered against all stupid shit.
Yeah.
To put it in perspective, we were in. Oh, there's my stupid cat coming across the road. We were in a country, and two of my guys killed somebody. Dark roads, people crossing roads in the middle of the night, and they ran some guy over. State Department says that if you kill a local, you don't stop, you don't get out of your vehicle, you head straight to your compound, you report it, and you wait for the authorities. Now, they ran this guy over in the middle of the night, and they booked it. Everything's reported on, the type of vehicle they were driving, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if my guys have gotten out of their vehicle to try to ascertain the situation, they probably would have been torn apart by a mob.
Yeah.
And police arrive to our location, contact the U.S. Embassy, we reported, et cetera, et cetera. In the end, I think we had to pay the family like $15,000 or something for compensation. But nobody's thrown in jail. You know what I mean? It's
the morality of that is questionable, really.
Well, the thing is,
I mean, I know accidents happen. Accidents do happen, but what you're saying is you've got cover. Whereas
the thing is, they did it. So they ran a guy over that stepped out in front of their vehicle on a dark road.
Yeah.
And
no, I get that. There was no maliciousness there.
So, but the thing is, it was all dealt with in a manner. Now, the fact that when you have these guys that are supposedly working for an agency and they're in jail, which I call bullshit, because you're covered under a big umbrella of the U.S. government, and we only let our people out to dry if we want them to go out to dry. So you do something.
Yeah, get that now. Yeah.
If you do something stupid, it's like stupid.
Yeah, you're on your own.
You're on your own. So, like I've done quite a few different assignments, but we've always got like these subcontractors that work for us or work with us, and sometimes they take airs that they think that they're probably covered under the same umbrella that we are, but in general they're not. So, like for example, you're somewhere in, like, say, South Sudan, and including in your program, you have evacuation plans. In your evacuation plans, you have primary and secondary evacuation routes, and then the third option. And then you also have monies to pay off, checkpoints and things like that, and monies for vehicles or airplanes or what have you. And then let's say one guy who's there picks up a local, and the local girl seems to think that she has the same cover that you do, and then you explain to her that she doesn't. So
bye.
Yeah, so but in general, in past administrations, when we have people overseas, we don't leave the the agencies do not like to leave bodies. Not only do we not leave bodies, but it's also that not only the person, but maybe whoever's working for you has information in their head that doesn't want to get out. Because obviously you sign a bunch of non-disclosure agreements and things like that. So it's, so when I see these stories about these guys that are doing these contract works or whatever else, and you see them been snagged, I call bullshit.
Or like you say, they've been left to dry. Yeah.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know.
and maybe they've done something really stupid.
So, out of all your time serving in the military, what's been your favourite or your best memory, and also what's been your worst?
Hey, buddy. Hi. So, of all the places I've served, the worst and the best.
Yeah.
Ah, that's a good one. Best place. Where I enjoyed myself the most?
Yeah.
Like I said,
And
Iraq.
why?
I loved Iraq.
So your experience of Iraq and mine have been very different.
Oh,
Very different.
well, I was down. Well,
Which is understandable.
open desert and doing a bunch of other stuff. So now, when I was working for the State Department, when we would go to these places, you're in a very nice hotel with a lot of State Department employees. You're on a nice salary. You working your 5 days a week. You've got nights off. You can go down to the club. You got your own vehicles with drivers. Uh, you get to go to the beach. You get to go on safaris. You work hard and then play hard.
Yeah. I get that. That's quite cool.
Yes. So, good money, easy come, easy go. That type of mentality. Now, I kind of crop everything in the same boat as being in the service, paying my dues as a grunt, and then working up to a level where I was, before I was finished. But everyone that was at the level before I was finished, they were all from the same type of background. You know what I mean? You got to pay your dues before you can do all the cool stuff, but you still should be able to do everything that you are supposed to do.
Yeah.
So I kind of all mix it in together. Crappiest place. Haiti.
Bad. I mean, I know it's not a very nice place, and it's got some massive issues.
Nigeria sucked too. Freaking hate Nigeria. Senegal was nasty.
You see, I know a guy who went out to do contracting, but not on the logistics side of it. And he said they went out to Sudan. And he said that's one of the scary. They were the only white guys in the area, and he said they felt that unsafe that the company they were contracting for actually got them accommodation outside of the country. And he said it was just so strange and they weren't armed. They weren't there as contracting arms. They were there selling logistics equipment.
The
Stuff like
problem
that.
with a lot of these countries, it's not just the country themselves. It's all the questionable things and people that you cross from point A to point B.
Yeah.
Put it in perspective, I was in South Sudan living in a very nice accommodation. In our accommodation, we were protected and guarded by the government, national police. We always had armed escorts. My number 2 was military intelligence, and he was always armed. And anytime we did something, we always had armed protection, etc., etc. And we would go to like different little bitty compounds. Like we want to go to lunch, we would go to one of these hotels that were mainly filled with UN people, World Food Program, World Save Doctors Without Borders and WPF and all these other do-gooder, hippie, goofy type people. Think everything's a marshmallow. And they are living in nice accommodations. They're eating good food. Like for example, there was a couple pilots that were flying with WPF, and they were telling me that maybe out of 1 month they do 2 flights for food. Everything else is ferrying people, but ferrying Westerners from point A to point B to, because it's a big business. These people aren't over there for free. And and they had this big hotel. You could go out. There's like where a lot of them were living, and big pool, nice bar, good booze, ice cream, westernized women, if that's what you wanted to chase, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we used to go in there on like on a Friday, and just go in there and have ourselves a nice meal, maybe go for a swim, do a little go to the club, and then you go back to our compound. And then this was in South Sudan, in Juba. Now, and then I get the word like on the Tuesday that why everything was, well, we all left and we came back to our thing. Some military people from South Sudan, some military, you don't know whether they were on or just off or whatever, but some armed soldiers came to the UN hotel, had themselves locked everybody in, had themselves a rape fest for the entire weekend. Because their security for these places, they're subcontracted. You know what I mean? They've got maybe gate guards or whatever else, and they're not armed. So a couple guys walk in, they display their weapons, and then they bring in all their buddies, and I think they had like a rape fest at this UN hotel for 3 days.
Jesus, never in the news.
You know what I mean? And then the hotel next to or the compound next to us, same thing. It had WPF guys in there, and then the gate got crashed by armed assailants. Military clothing, AKs, went room to room, robbed everybody. And then, of course, our compound is government. It's a government compound, government-sponsored compound. So all our guys are armed and soldiers at the gates, and they're not going to let anybody in. So when you start looking at the different elements of what people crisscross into, that's where the danger starts happening.
Yeah.
So, like one of the weird assignments we had years ago, I had some contacts somewhere, and someone contacted me to evacuate one of their family members. Now, when they set all this up, I did organized a security detail for them from our prior clients, and we paid their salaries, and they escorted them out somewhere. And during that point in time, military coup happens, and they need to be evacuated. The only problem is she was there with like Doctors Without Borders or something stupid, and she was there with a bunch of other people. But the other people were not our concern because we weren't paid to get them out.
Fair enough.
So
yeah.
We send a team in. We convince the young lady to leave. She won't leave without her friends. We convince her to come with us. We tell her she can bring her friends. We don't say we'll fly her friends out. We say you can bring your friends. She brings her friends. And then we have the plane. And then we load her on the plane. And then she realizes there's no room for her friends. So, long story short, her dummy butt didn't want to get on the plane. So we left her.
Fucking hell. Fair enough. What can you do? I mean, you can't. Well, I mean, you can force them, but
you know what I mean. You can't. You're paid for a job, and then when the client comes, then you call whoever has sent you and says they refuse to go, and then they start exchanging words, and then she's like, and then you're like, well, if we leave, these security people we've just paid to protect you, unless you can keep paying them, because we don't have extra cash to keep paying them. We paid for the plane to get you out. And then in the end, she just wanted to stay. Long story short, I think she got snagged up somewhere out of a checkpoint, and I think they must have kept her for a couple months.
Don't want to think what would happen.
They kept her and her friends for a couple months. So
it's a very different world, isn't it?
Yeah, there's
them countries.
there's a world where you want to see things how you think they are. Like, for example, years ago, we were at another place, and we ran across, and see, when we would always go someplace, we always have liaisons with the host nation, because it's in their best interest to always keep us safe, because not only do we pay their salaries, it's also in exchange of, like equipment and money and training. And so, and then you have these other contractors or guys that are fishing for contracts or some type of work, and they go to like these clubs or these hotels where like UN or security, some type of international people all hang out, you know what I mean? And they're all looking for introduction, looking for business, looking for some type of business opportunity. So we were in a club that was mainly, most of the clients were all UN people. And then a couple Brits there, British guys, were talking a big game. And then they came and sat with us and they tried to talk to us. I'm like, oh yeah, we're with State Department. Oh yeah. And then they start showing some cards and trying to do some introductions. And then I asked one of the guys, I said, who are you with? I'm not a spy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where, the thing is, I always joke, the Brits abroad, they're always like, they're spies, right? The more intriguing on the guy, he's like, oh, you don't, sorry, let me plug this in. The more intrigued he is, the more he's going to frequently come up with some bullshit story about where he's from. You don't need to know who I am. I'm like, all right, whatever, dude. Get over yourself. So my number 2 was a very connected government official, and he goes, well, he's like, Mr. Ferguson, I didn't like their answers. And I said, yeah, it was kind of off. He says, do you mind if I have a go at it? I'm like, yeah, sure. So he's like on his phone. 10 minutes later, 20 minutes later, a couple big canvas trucks roll out, and they roll in, and a bunch of soldiers get out of the vehicles, and they go into this place, and they collect the 2 individuals. So
Yeah.
I jokingly call them spies like us, like the old movie from the 80s.
Yeah.
With Dan Aykroyd and who was it?
Yeah, I know which one you mean, yeah.
Yeah.
That's quite a good movie, actually.
It was quite funny. So they scoop Tweedledee and Tweedledum up. They bring him over our vehicle. And then the officer, he's like, talks to my guy, and then he talks to me. He says, those them? I'm like, yeah, that's them. And then they take them away. 2 weeks later, I'm asking, I'm like, hey, man, you remember those 2 guys that they pulled up? And he says, oh, yeah. I said, what happened to him? He says, I don't know. Picks up the phone, calls. He's like, oh, yeah, they still got them. They're interrogating them.
Wow.
And you know what that means.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully they were all right. Jesus.
I think
they're trying to play the big game in that,
yeah. So one of the bigger, sadly, there's too many guys running around overseas that should not be overseas. They're getting some type of backing, but it's not government backing. So when things go wrong, things go really wrong.
Yeah, they've got no backing. Yeah, I mean, you get companies trying to look for, I don't know. I mean, I've got no experience or insight into these type of things at all, but I would imagine, you can, I could imagine that people are trying to, the old diamond trade, the old gold trade, oil. Oil's going to be the biggest thing, isn't it? Where people are trying to get
a lot of the ex-Legion guys, they do that. They do petroleum and gold and diamonds and these other things, but it's the same concept. They're working for companies that are private. They're not armed.
Yeah.
They are also not properly trained. They were in the forces X amount of years ago, but the last time they've had any type of formal pistol training or verification or rifle training or a range time is probably years. And their position is usually unarmed. And obviously when shit goes wrong, it goes really wrong.
Yeah, especially places like that, yeah. Already, yeah.
Well, Ivory Coast, if you remember correctly, Ivory Coast fell 2003. So Ivory Coast, the French military went in with orders to evacuate 12,000 French nationals. They only found 8.
What?
Yeah.
I didn't know about this. This is a new one on me.
No,
Wow.
there's always something going on, but of course there's in general when these types of things happen, there's always a gag order.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, if it's not local news that affects us, no one's fucking interested, really, are they? It doesn't
No,
hit the papers, it doesn't hit the TVs.
then the
Stuff
narrative is
happens in Africa, and that's it.
well. If you want to look at what's going on right now in Gaza, it's the same shit. I mean, the narrative is, these people are suffering. The narrative is not what happened that led to them suffering, right?
I mean, that's a whole different podcast.
But you
That's
know
a
what I mean.
long one.
It's whatever
Yeah,
it's whatever it is being publicized.
it's whatever sells papers, and it's whatever
It's
fucking
whatever
gets on
sells.
the news.
Yeah.
Like it's as
If you
simple
want
as
to,
that in the end.
it's like.
I mean, all the stuff has been forgot about.
Yeah,
I
everything.
mean, Ukraine's not in the news as much as it was.
Well, I remember when it kicked off. I'm in watching with my in-laws, and my thought was, of course, they're all thinking, "Oh well, we'll protest, we'll put sanctions, and we'll let them know, and et cetera, et cetera." And then they said, "Well, what do you think, Glenn?" I'm like, "Well, Bosnia-Herzegovina, 10 years."
Yeah.
Right? I said, all these other places, 10 years, 15 years. Iraq, Afghanistan, 20 years. I'm like, you really think it's going to be over because you want to put sanctions? And then I thought, well, my son's with 173rd Airborne. He's in a quick reactionary force. And you know what? He was right. He was 4 hours and they were wheels up in Lithuania. But
Yeah.
when they land, of course,
It's fucking scary, isn't it? It's scary. What's the potential of what could happen? I mean, I don't think it will. I think it'll be contained in Ukraine.
well,
It's not going to
and
spread out.
if now here is the big if. Now, current administration, all for it.
Yeah.
Next administration. Okay, because now how much money have we thrown at this?
Trillions.
When is enough going to be enough? And how much longer are you going to tell your taxpayers it's for the better good? And then what are we going to be getting? What are the taxpayers going to be getting back for their suffering? And they're giving their money away.
Well, the answer's nothing, really, in the end, isn't it?
Yeah. So, but your basic civilian, when it all kicked off, they're like, well, and I'm like, no, the reality is it's going to be a war of attrition. Now, my wife's company, they have an engineer who's from there, and he was talking to me, and I said, well, how much longer is it going to last? And I said, how much longer do you want the American taxpayers to pay for it? And he's like, well, I'm like, you're not there, so why should my taxpayers keep paying for it? That's my retirement. That's my parents' retirement. That's my sons and daughters' tax dollars paying for it. For what? I said, are you suddenly going to come to their aid? But the reality is, and I said, the reality is that if the Soviets are playing the long game, which they are, they've got more resources, and eventually everybody's going to get tired, because when governments change, ideas change, and it's not going to just be a permanent money bank.
No.
And the more you start crossing the line of getting involved, at what point in time does the other side say enough's enough and let's let loose something that you can't take back?
Yeah. I mean, fingers crossed it never gets that far, but I think you're right. It's going to be there'll be a stalemate, and the lines that are almost drawn at the moment like I've mentioned this before on previous podcasts, I think the lines on Crimea and the Donbass regions and stuff like that, I think they'll stay and I think they'll settle and I think it'll just become part of Russia. Like the people who live there want it to be.
Okay, well look at Korea.
Yeah.
It's been a stalemate ever since because
Yeah.
it got to the point where somebody says we're going to use things, and they said, all right, enough's enough, and they drew the line. The line's still there.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
he said he was going to use things, and he got sacked. On
so,
MacArthur.
but me, now, me personally, if I was the aggressor and I'm poking sticks at somebody and everybody else is sitting in their yard but giving them the sticks to poke back, eventually I might turn my attention to whoever's giving them sticks. Now, me personally, if that's how I was doing it, I would already start letting tactical nukes drop. What do you got to lose?
Okay, the world. Because like you said, you're going to let something loose that you can't bring back.
Yeah, but that's.
And I suppose if they drop one in Ukraine, it's going to be.
No, I would do a couple neighboring countries that were helping them. And the thing is, we as the Westerners will show restraint because the Westerners are limited by their ability to respond because they're not the type of people that go all out. Look at the fiasco on who's running your Minister of Defense or these other countries' Minister of Defense. Look who their elected politicians are. They've elected and have people that are not alpha type personalities, and yeah, it could be very interesting.
I mean, to see the other side of it, and there's a reason for that. I mean, you touched on that earlier about Korea. I mean, it was MacArthur who wanted to basically nuke China and just glass half of it, and he was very swiftly taken out of his office and told don't be stupid type of thing.
He pretty much
the areas he
disappeared
wanted
right
to
after that.
nuke. Yeah, well, I mean, the areas he wanted to nuke have still been uninhabitable now. And the world would have been a very different place. A very different place to what it is.
Everybody recovers.
Yeah.
Look at the Japanese.
That's
They
almost
recovered.
saying it.
Japanese recovered.
Yeah, well, no, that was like a little fucking cap gun compared to what they're going to fire at people nowadays, isn't it? So.
Yeah, but eventually,
it's a. Ukraine's a weird one. I mean, I've got to be careful what I say about it. Really.
I know, but like for me, I don't care. But
no, I have to be because my girlfriend's from Ukraine, so I have to be quite careful what I say.
That's their, that's the issue. But if it was me, I would already level the place and anyone that was helping them.
I would say I don't. I can see what you're saying, and I can see the mentality of the Russians is like that as well.
Of course. What do they do? Okay, based on how everything is working right now, the jokes are everyone's about equity, inclusion, and all these other alphabet things, and they tend to be just like, hey, screw you, man. They're not dealing with the left politics that everyone in the world is. It's it's our way or the highway. So the problem, like for example, over the years, my government has taken out so many governments based on politics. But the problem is, as soon as you remove the bad guy, 10 bad guys pop up.
Yeah.
So
the Arab Risings, getting rid of Gaddafi in Libya, probably one of the biggest mistakes we've made recently. Iraq, probably one of the biggest mistakes we've made for years.
Taking out Saddam.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember coming back from the Gulf in 2003, and we were out on the beer, and I had an argument with the Royal Engineer guy, and I said, we've taken out Saddam. He was the only one that was holding the fucking place in check.
Yeah,
he was holding the Iranians in check. It was stable. whether he was doing right or wrong, morally or whatever, it doesn't matter. The place was stable.
Yeah, because everybody wants
and
a piece of the piece of the pie that they had.
yeah, like you say, I mean, you look at Libya. It was a very stable country. You get rid of
I know.
Gaddafi, and it turns into a fucking Wild West show.
Yeah, because Ronnie Reagan whacked a couple of his kids, and that calmed him down.
Yeah.
But we left him in power, and then the previous administration says, "All right, let's do Arab Spring. Have a go."
Yeah.
So
Let's see what happens.
yeah, and then of course all that did was just turn everything complete upside down. We pulling out Afghanistan. What a madhouse that was, because all you did was leave a power vacuum with all our toys.
Yeah.
So
That was just, when you look back, you just think, what the fuck was the point?
I
Especially
know.
Afghanistan. You just think, what's the fucking point of that?
Well, we should have just, in my personal opinion, we should have just tactically freaking removed anyone that we want to remove, and then let them have at it.
Or just kept out of it in the first place.
Yeah, in the end, it's all about somebody. The thing is,
somebody had to settle the score.
If you don't settle your scores, everyone's just going to go ahead and do what they want.
Yeah.
And in the end, you just have too many chiefs and not enough Indians.
Yeah.
Which my daddy used to say,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get that.
You poke the hornet's nest and something's going to come out of it.
And it did, and it got worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, but I've seen
it
enough.
Is what it is. There's nothing we can do to change it now.
But I've seen enough over the years of different administrations, and when I was in Africa, every time an African regime changes, they kill all the family members and all political members from the previous administration, and then they go ahead and put in their friends and their buddies. Because knowledge is power, and if no one has knowledge, then no one has the power, and it's all about power and perception of power. So,
which happens over and over and over again,
over and over and over
like
again.
Cambodia and
it is all it goes on all the time. But yeah. Anyways, I'm kind of waiting to see how it's all going to play out, but it's going to go on.
I think it's going to be interesting. Yeah, I mean, Biden's stepped down at the time of this podcast. He stepped down yesterday or the day before. I can't remember.
But he's still kicking around, and freaking his flunkies are still. They're still. Yeah. I'm still waiting for some magic card to drop from somewhere, because when the previous
magic card. I don't know American politicians. I don't know American politics, and I'm not invested in them. But in my opinion, that kid who took a shot at Trump won Trump the election. Really, whether that's a good or a bad thing, I haven't got. I wouldn't say I dislike Trump. I wouldn't say I like him. I'm quite ambivalent towards the guy.
Here in Scotland, they hate him. But you know what? The best part about
that's because he keeps buying the golf courses.
Well, you know what? We live in between Edinburgh and Scotland, or Edinburgh and Glasgow, and just south of Stirling. And if we wanted to go to the beach, there's a beach called Ayr Beach, and Ayr Beach is absolutely log jammed. Absolutely log jammed. And if you can't get a seat on it, you can't get a parking place, you can't find nothing. But if you can get over your hatefulness and hatred of a man who owns a golf course, he has a very nice beach, and you can go to that. And you can go to that beach and not see anyone for miles, because people don't go there for the beach; they go for the golf.
Yeah, fair enough.
So when we go to the beach, we go down to his beach, and we have the whole entire beach to ourselves. So.
Yeah. All right, he's got a good use then. I mean, like I say, I can't comment on the guy because I've got.
Oh, I know you. Obviously, but in general, I have served under numerous administrations and political agendas over the years. One thing I do like the Brits that the Americans have got wrong is every time we change politics, our cabinet changes.
Hmm.
So our generals and all our guys that make all those decisions, they all change based off the president and the politics. So our politics is never constant.
Hmm.
Where you
Yeah.
folks have isolated your ministry defense from the government.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the prime minister, and it's not the ministers that run the country. It's the civil servants.
Yeah.
It's them who are in charge, really.
Yeah. So every time we shift back and forth, now I have done some stupid crap over the years, all because some politician wanted it done. But you know what? I didn't care.
It was your job.
I didn't care. You want me to shoot this person? Friends today, enemies tomorrow. I don't care. Don't change nothing about me. So,
Do
but you
you think
do.
there's going to be a good future for America then? With because let's face it, Trump's going to win it.
I am looking for it. I would like to go back where my father and my children are first and not the world.
Right.
The
Yeah.
world's
No, I get that.
problem is the world's problem is not my parents' problems. It's not my children's problems. It's not my family's problems. I could give two shits if the place burnt to the ground. I think
Yeah.
that if you want to go on some rant about how you think the world's going to end or the temperatures are changing, I could give two fucks. Your basic person cares how much it costs to put fuel in their vehicle if they can feed their kids. If their wages are not being taxed outrageously for somebody else in the world that cannot take care of themselves.
Yeah.
It's not, honestly, I do not know or am related to anyone that gives two shits about Ukraine.
I mean, like I say, I've got a
I
different
understand that
investment in
part,
that.
but you know what I mean? It's like
But in reality, you're right. You are perfectly right in what you're saying. You see people protesting. I don't fucking know what's the point of that. They're protesting Palestine. They're protesting this, that, and the other. Yeah, great. Stop oil. Fucking what? Shut up. All you're doing is annoying people. People want to get on with their lives.
well, it's like,
All
for
right.
example, here in Scotland, you have most of the population that makes these choices in the political arena, and they're from the large cities. But the rest of the country
Generous
is,
from universities.
yeah, and the rest of the country are the people who actually work and make things work. And so
Yeah.
they're perfectly happy to make decisions to exclude generations and entire towns of people from the industry just because they have a bug up their ass.
Yeah.
So,
Which all boils down to the way I see it, everyone's got an opinion, right? Most opinions are wrong. Most of them are full of shit. All right. But everyone's just got to live and get on. So just chill about it.
I look at if I'm going to put fuel in my car to take my kid to swimming lessons. If I want to run up down to, it's like this past week we were up. No, 3 weeks ago we drove down to Windsor for Legoland.
Yeah. Guys, it's a long drive.
Yeah, six and a
It's
half
a long
hours.
drive for us. Yeah, for a Yankee, you're just nipping out for a fucking
Yeah, but
newspaper.
it was 800 miles down there and back from my house.
Yeah.
Now, if fuel wasn't so damn expensive, it wouldn't have been so bad.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, like last weekend, we were up in Aberdeen I took my son to the Blippy show, the live Blippy show. And then another weekend we were somewhere else. And then this weekend coming up, we're going to go down to Kelso and the borders and go to a farm festival with tractor pulls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
My life is worried about. We think about upkeep of the vehicle, fuel for the vehicle, going out to dinner, the groceries, electricity, the normal shit. Everything else in the world does not affect me.
Hmm.
And so when people start talking about different conflicts in the world, if they're so worried about it, go back and do what you need to do in your own country, but don't rely on the rest of the world to cover your problems.
Yeah, I get that. And you're right what you said earlier about like you said a line there that kind of resonated with me. That was, I want the government to look after the country first, and not the rest of the world.
Yeah, I could
You
care
know,
less. I could care. You know what? My forefathers. When I look at it this way, my forefathers, my ancestors, have fought for what we like, not for what the world likes. It's like, for example, me as a Yank living overseas, I've got to listen to so much abuse about our politics, and at the end of the day, I'm like, does that affect you? Right?
It's not your fault, for fuck's sake, either. You
No,
know what I mean?
no, I'm like, does it affect you as a
Yeah.
person? Does it affect you? Does it affect your council tax? No? Then who cares?
Yeah.
Does it change how much? Did it change what your coffee cost or your tea? No? Then why do you care? Oh, I'm offended. Who cares? Get over yourself.
Yeah. That one line, I'm offended, just grips my shit. I don't care if you're offended.
Like I said, I've had, as a government employee for years, we are not allowed to criticize our leadership. That's just a big no-no. You don't criticize your leadership. So when things go like horribly wrong, you just say, okay, whatever my mission is, I'll do it. Because you obviously over the years when we had, I've lived through, I can remember far back as Carter being president. And I remember my father not even be able to buy a job.
Yeah.
I can remember as a kid being in a car for gas lines and food and inflation, and everything was gone to shit. And then I remember when Reagan became president and suddenly our life was good again. And then obviously then you get a little older and then you go in the forces and then everything else keeps going on. And then you start working for different administrations and you see things happen and you go off and fight their wars or you go off and do the conflicts or whatever else. And in the day, you just like, I really could care less about all of it. So that's the problem, isn't it? Well, if you spend enough time outside your own comfort zone, then at the end of the day, you really don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that.
So when we change administrations, either we're able to change administrations for the other side, but if we change administrations, then we're going to go back to courts and rioting and burning, and that's what they did the first 4 years. Because they haven't rioted or burnt anything in the last 4 years. Right? Nobody's burnt anything. No cities are on fire. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you've got to draw the line, haven't you? They all go mental, and you just say, "Well, hang on a minute. You voted. The people voted. If that was the result, whether it's right or wrong, it's a democratic."
Yeah, I just go with whatever the country's gone for. But I'm not going to go out and get mad and start burning shit. Because I guarantee if it was us against them, it would not go their way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Too funny. Anyways, so yeah, I'm waiting to see, but it's all going to happen. And when that happens, same thing. It's going to be the bigger question because if you remove all the strong leaders from making certain decisions, in my personal opinion, then whoever the bully on the block is going to do what he or she wants because they know there's no consequence. Right?
Yeah, which is blatantly obvious in what in the attitude of certain people who could,
Well, I'm still waiting for. It's like, for example, China. They're playing the long game.
Yeah,
But,
got no comment on that. This
but,
conversation's gone way off piece for me.
but you know what I mean.
I'm uncomfortable.
But in general, everyone is playing their game until they figure out who's going to be in charge, which of course decides as soldiers what we have to deal with.
Yeah.
Because soldiers in general.
You saying that there about the administration changing and the wars change. I mean, at the moment, in the last 30 years, it's America's led. The rest of the world has followed, whether that's right or wrong. There's no other superpower, for want of a different word, who has so much sway and as much power.
Yeah.
Having the wrong person in charge, like you say, could just really fuck everything up.
How would you guys feel if you had big Chinese spy balloons hanging over freaking Westminster?
Who says we haven't?
But you know what I mean, though.
Yeah. There's no answer to it all, though, is there? I mean, well, like you say, you've got to go back and say what you said, that if it affects me directly, then I'll worry about it.
Yeah.
Like you, I've done my time in the military. I'm not in the military anymore. And then even if it does affect me, what the fuck can I do about it?
Oh yeah,
not,
of course.
Not really. So you just got to get on with it.
Or you can just joke like I do. Or you just joke like I do and you wait for the fall of Rome.
Which hopefully I won't see in my lifetime, but I've got a fucking funny feeling I'm going to.
If it happens. It's going to be it's going to be glorious. It's going to be glorious. It's just going to happen. It's going to go so bad, so wrong. But it's like the conversation I said when I was there with my in-laws when the Ukraine all kicked off. They're like, well, and of course they're all extremely well educated, like extremely well educated.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law, he's got a degree from here. He's got a degree from there. He's Oxford. He's ideology. He's all, but you're like, dude, honestly. And the only thing he was worried about was, well, if we let them know we're not happy.
I don't really care.
You know what I mean? And he was there with a couple other family members, which is the same mentality, and they're like, yeah, well, and the only thing they were concerned about was it was the time when when Boris Johnson was there was something political with Boris Johnson that was going, and that was he might take our rights away, and this will be over in a week. And I'm like, yeah, you guys, you just keep dreaming.
Yeah,
you keep dreaming, man. But like I said a few weeks ago, I've been talking to one of the engineers up at the company. Who was Ukrainian. He goes, well, I'm like, well, I said, the money's going to stop eventually.
It is. It's got to in the end, anyway.
Yeah,
right. We've been on for nearly 2 hours now. I didn't think you were expecting that.
Yeah, no worries.
So that's flown by, isn't it? I think we'll have to call it a quits on that one now. Otherwise, we'll be all night.
You just edit out what you don't want in there.
You know what? It's as I've explained to other people who I record with. I don't edit it really, unless somebody's slagged someone off that I don't think's true, or I can't prove, or it's libelous to me. That's the only time I cut anything out, which I've only had to do once up to now.
You know what? Mickey Mouse doesn't have real ears.
Yeah, I don't. And I don't think Trump's going to come looking for my podcast, so I think I'll be safe there anyway. But honestly, thanks for sharing your story. It's
no worries.
Interesting. I've just been, you know what it is. Normally, I'm more chatty when I do these podcasts, but I couldn't I can't compare anything I've done to what you've done. You know what I mean?
Right. No, it's not. No, I've just been lucky enough to do some pretty cool stuff over the years. But you know what? It's like, for example, my mother. One last thing. So my mother was a Marine in the '60s, 20 years in the Corps. And like old Legionnaires or whoever, like for example, you've met those soldiers that when they were in the service, that's their defining moment.
Mhm. Yeah.
So no matter what they are, whoever they are, what they did, whether they had a successful business, or they had a family, or they were whatever. So my mother used to tell me, she goes, Glenn, she goes, being a Marine is I was a Marine. She says, I was also a mother. I was also this. I was also that. She says, but that is not who I am. She said, but there are Marines out there, and their defining moment is they went to boot camp.
Yeah, I get you.
So
And I
everything else,
understand that as well.
everything else in their life they've accomplished. So, like for me, I think one of my main accomplishments is just fathering 8 children.
That's quite an accomplishment.
You know what I mean? So,
a couple more, you'll have a football team.
oh God, don't get me started on.
Sorry, soccer team.
You know what? This is a conversation that happens all the time over here.
Yeah, I can
Now,
imagine.
I am not related to. I say this about other things, or know anyone, or ever hung out with anybody that has played that game back in the States. That is what our girls play, or very effeminate boys.
Right, you know when I said there was bits I don't normally edit the podcasts.
But it's true. But in the States, especially in Georgia, that's what our girls play. I don't know any boys or men or cousins or anybody that's ever played that sport.
Right, so normally I'd do this as little clips as well to advertise it. That little section there is going out first because that'll bring people in.
But it's true,
Right,
though.
I'm gonna. Yeah, I'll have to say goodbye to you now. Again, thanks for coming on and sharing your stories.
Yeah, no
It's
worries.
been
Hey,
absolutely fantastic.
if I can send some links to you, I'll send some links to the Escape the Legion. You'll have a good laugh.
Yeah, brilliant. And I'll also, when I do publish it, I'll put links out for that so people
All right,
can
no
go
worries.
and
All right,
look
man.
it
You be
up.
safe.
I'll just stop the recording on here. 2 secs.
Yeah, no worries. I'm gonna go back to my.
Oh yeah, I hope you enjoyed that podcast. I enjoyed recording it. If you could just hit the like button, and also if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell, that'd be great because it'll help the channel grow. The more people will see it, the bigger it'll get, and the more guests I can get on, and the more people I can talk to. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, like I said. Look forward to the next one. Hopefully, we'll be out next week as normal. Bye bye now.